but no one really knows me. Sometimes I need to get it out so that I can really be free. Cause it ain't easy when you live a life where the fans adore you. It doesn't mean that you never need to get away. There's a little place that I find whenever I need to unwind. Dealing with the pressure, living life the way I do. Where they always make it easy, I can just relax and be there. Baby, are you ready? It's a paradise for two. Feeling all around you. And girl, I know the struggle, dealing with what they do. Cause it ain't easy when you live a life where they depend on you. I know the feeling, let me take care of you. There's a little place that I find whenever I need to unwind. Dealing with the pressure, and I know you feel it too. Where they always make it easy, I can just relax and be there. Baby, are you ready? It's time for me.
I can take you anywhere in the whole wide world. On the Eiffel Towers where our love occurs. Is it Belize, Greece, or maybe the islands? Take a deep, long breath and just close your eyelids. Relax and take a seat and just let your mind slip to a place you want to go. All love, no violence. France, Egypt, maybe Japan. No matter where we go, I want to hold your hand. We can hit the beach and put our toes in the sand. Maybe go to San Fran and hear an indie band. Where you going, little mama? I want to take you on a trip. I can be your only genie. You can use one wish. Then we try all the places that you wanted to exist and go around the world on a plane or a ship. And trust me, I know it's like a dream come true, but it's nothing compared to what I would do for you. Just one night, just to show you the world and give you my all, cause I found my dream girl. Adventure is a word that was made for two, and the way I see it, it's just me and you. Cause when we're together, there's nothing we can't do. JK and Jeopardy, now what you gonna do? Like
What is up, everyone? What is up? Great day today. Thank you for joining us on the Right Way podcast. My name is Jonathan. I am your host. And today we are joined by a very special guest, but we want to get all the beginning things out of the way. We are joined by Mary C. Moore of Kimberley, Cameron and Associates, literary agent, to answer you guys' questions about the publishing industry. You can follow us on Facebook Instagram. I think what Twitch is one we just added. Twitter, Right Way Pod, right spelled like you're writing a book, WRITE, not that's the right way to go, WRGHT. And we also are on Twitter. I think it's Right Way Pod, or it might be Right Way Past. One of the two. I can't remember off the top of my head. But without further ado, if you want to support the podcast, Cash App links are down below, Venmo down below, internet website, www.iflowcreative.com. And if you have any questions on editing, on the writing process, how to create a book that readers want to read, go there and send us a form request. We'd be happy to help you out. But I would like to bring on our special guest. Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here. Hi.
Awesome. Introducing Mary C. Moore. She was gracious enough to give us some of her time. Thank you for joining us, Mary. And why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
Thank you for having me. My name is Mary, middle initial C. Moore. Sometimes people put it all together in my last name, but I do that because the name Mary Moore is so common that it's a way to differentiate. I work out of the Bay Area, California. Kimberley Cameron and Associates has been a literary agency for about 30 years. And we're based out of Tiburon, California. And I'm here to answer burning questions if you have any.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things that I get a lot actually from most of my authors is how do I lock up an agent? And I'm like, you would have to talk to the agents about that because I am not one of them. So why don't we start with that? First question, what is your process for deciding on whether or not you're going to bring an author on as a client?
Wow, lot to unpack there. So what we'll start with is that, just like the bookshelves and the bookstores and the sections in the bookstore, agents tend to specialize in each of these sections. There are agents who have been doing it for a long time that maybe specialize in all the genres. And I find that the longer I'm in the industry, I do expand my representation of what I represent. But for the beginner, starting out, a beginner agent, you really want to kind of focus and specialize in one genre, which would mean something like mystery or science fiction or nonfiction, with an emphasis on self-help, stuff like that. And the reason why is because you really have to get to know the publishers, the imprints at those publishing houses, the editors that work there, and really also know the market. So it means you read a lot in the genre, what's coming out, what's successful. And this is all useful advice for writers too, obviously, but it's really, really important for agents because if you don't know the market and you don't know who you're sending your stuff to, then you're not going to be successful. So with that in mind, I like to kind of backpedal all the way to the ultimate goal, which is to find readers. And, as a writer, when you're looking for an agent, rather than think about how can I lock up that agent, what I would encourage you to do is actually think about who is your ideal reader. And so if you want to picture yourself or your ideal reader walking into a bookstore, the next thing you're going to think about is what section does that reader immediately gravitate towards, So if you've got, your typical teenager, maybe 16, 17, walks over to the YA shelf, really is looking for, fantasy YA. And then, gets over to that shelf and is kind of like looking at all the titles, what do those titles look like? And then what would your book look like to appeal to that specific reader? And, once you kind of get that locked down, the rest of it can, naturally fall into place. Granted, it's not going to be super easy. It's not like you find that reader and then next thing you know, you're on your path. But,
Right.
Once you really have that reader in mind, it can kind of help you backtrack a little bit and think, okay, do I want to write those books for that particular kid, for the next 10 years? Is that what I'm really excited about? When I go to the bookstore, is that the section that I go to? Is that the section that I'm super familiar with? Because, if you're a scientist writing, nonfiction about chemistry, but you decided that you want to write YA fantasy, you know, and you've never read it before other than maybe Harry Potter, you're looking at a disconnect between, you know, the true passion of what you want to write and what your target audience is. So that's more important than like locking down the agent. And once you've really thought about that, thought about what you want for your career, then you're kind of already advanced beyond, you know, the person who just throws spaghetti at the wall trying to just get whatever agent you want, because then you're going to start finding the agents that, you know, work in that field, work in that YA space. I'm using this YA as an example here. You know, myself, for example, but I know at least 100 other agents that represent YA, you know, fantasy. And so then you're looking at, you know, and by knowing that, by knowing the books that you love, you're going to start seeing, you know, who publishes those books. Do those agents have, you know, connections to those imprints and things like that? So that's really kind of more what I would urge people to focus on. And that's going to advance you far more than doing the deep dive of like, oh, this agent likes cats, so I'm going to tell them that, you know, my book has cats.
So focus on the reader versus the agent, the target audience versus the agent. That's something that I tell people to do. Like I work mainly with, like I told you, self-publishing authors. I tell them, don't focus on like the steps of this, and this. Focus on finding your readers and the people who actually enjoy your work.
Yeah.
Because that's the point, right? Yeah. Like an agent's going to want to see, is this book well written? Does this book appeal to the audience? Can we sell the book?
Exactly.
In essence.
And I mean, in essence, self-publishing, I was just going to say, self-publishing and traditional publishing, the end point is the same, as you said.
Right.
So it's a very different path to get there, but that's ultimately whatever decision you're picking, indie, self-published, agent, traditional, that's what you should be focused on.
Right. Okay, so let's take a step back from your process. Let's just say I'm a brand new author, right? Worked on this book for 5 years, got an editor, it's well written. How do I write my query letter in a way, and I know every agent and every agency is going to be different, but how do I write it in the most appealing way? Like what should I leave out of it? What should I put in it? Should I just blab on and on about do a mini synopsis of my book in the query letter? Like, does that just end up in the thread? Like, how do I write a better query letter?
That's a great question. And I know it can make writers a little bit, in their head, because you see so much conflicting advice from different agents. But the baseline of it is, again, and you're going to hear this theme again and again, go back to your reader. So if your reader in the bookstore picked up your book and looked at the back cover, because the whole point, I mean, yeah, maybe you have a great cover, it's a well-written book, but like they're going to read that back, it's called the market copy, right? Or the blurb, the pitch.
The blurb, right.
The blurb is actually, I think, when it's a writer complimenting another writer. So the term we use is actually more of the pitch or the market copy, or it's in the inside flap of a hardcover book. Read those. You need to train your mind in a way that's different than writing novels, right? And pitch writing is a different skill set. And so I always highly recommend either go in the bookstore, go to the library if you don't have time for that, go on to Amazon, and you don't have to buy anything. You just go and you read the back cover copies of those books that you loved, the books that you just recently read. And you're going to see, there's not a ton of detail, it's not a synopsis. It's different than a synopsis. It's more of what I call the movie trailer for and I can kind of give you hints and tips and, like stylistic ways of doing things, but like none of that is going to be as successful as you reading just, I was going to curse here, a lot. I'm talking, 20, 50 books, not the books themselves, just the pitches. And that's going to get your mind thinking in a different way. And that is the core of your query, right? Because you want that reader, and in the sense, the agent, to pick up your book and browse the first couple pages. That's your ultimate goal, right? So all the other stuff can kind of fall away. And then within that is obviously your bio, representing yourself. And the best thing I can say for that, especially for a new writer, you probably don't have a bio, really. You probably maybe have maybe one short story published, something like that. Don't stress about that unless you're nonfiction. That's another different animal. But for fiction, just state why you are the writer for this novel. And it can be little things like, okay, I wrote a cozy mystery about a knitting club, and I actually happen to run a knitting blog online. And you could say, like, I brought that experience. That's really fun and helpful. Or you're a librarian, or you're a teacher that works with kids and you're writing YA, stuff like that. Super helpful. If you have nothing like that, if you just want to say, like you write mysteries and you are just a voracious reader of mysteries and you've always you can say something like that. And in the end, you can just say, I live with my 2 cats and parrot in the middle of Wisconsin. And that it can be a one line if that's all you've got. That's totally fine.
Okay. But again, it's almost, I don't want to say it's copywriting, because it's almost like copywriting, but not quite.
Right. It's market
but
copy.
You want to, I'm sorry?
Market copy is the word.
So, okay. Then I guess it is copywriting,
Right.
if we're really breaking it down.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I say on the indie side is, listen, your market copy, I used to call it a blurb, but you've educated me on that. So I will adjust that.
I mean, definitions are vague, but blurbs in my field tend to be what when you get those little one-liners of support from fellow writers, that tends to be it.
Okay.
So
all right. I mean, it's good to know. But one of the things that I teach to authors that come into my space is that first page, like your narrative hook, is really important. Really important. Like that look inside feature on Amazon.
Yeah.
If it doesn't hook the reader,
exactly,
you're not even A, going to get the sale, and B, I did the statistics on it. 84% of readers, if they're not entertained, will cast the book aside and never pick it up again.
And if I can interrupt for just a second, you have to remember an agent is the hardest, like the most difficult reader of all, right? So we're not only, readers can be a lot more forgiving, whereas we will be,
right.
We're looking for any reason, and not because we hate writers, just the opposite. We love writers, obviously. We want to work with you. We're always looking for new clients. It's just, I get about 10 a day, when I'm open to queries, and I'm on the low end, talking to, some of you may have heard of Donald Moss. He's one of the biggest agents. Yes. So I was on a panel with him once, and I kind of said aside to him, I was like, well, how many are you getting a day? And he said 50 a day. So imagine trying to read the first page of, I'm sure he has assistants and things like that, but still. Okay. Sorry.
Right.
Not to interrupt your flow.
No, I'm actually glad you said that, because like, even though I'm not a literary agent, but being somebody who's worked with publishers and I've helped people do their query letters, you do have to think, okay, this agent has 50, 20, 10, 5 other authors every day reaching out to the thing to get a book. You multiply that times 30 days in a month, like you have to stay out from the rest of the authors that are coming in. So I'm glad that you said that, because it's not, sometimes if it's just coming from one person, like people don't believe it. Yeah. Right. Like I want them to hear it straight from the people that they're trying to work with.
Right.
She just told you she gets 10 a day, every day, of other writers in your field. I'm talking to the writers now, in your field, or your genre rather, trying to lock up an agent. So like, how do you stand out? Then don't make those mistakes. Actually, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
You get 10 a day, so you read these all the time. Biggest mistakes that authors make. Give me like 3 of the top ones.
Whew. Well, I'm a lot more forgiving than I used to be, because, and I think that this happens with, when you're a newer agent, you get really irritated really quickly because you're like, people are wasting my time. And then as you're in the industry longer and longer, you start to understand more and more that, writers just don't know. They just don't know. And that's, so I tend to be a lot more forgiving. But I will say one of the, the biggest mistakes tend to be comparing yourself to, the big, like saying, I want to be the next Stephen King. I want to be the next, J.K. Rowling. I want to be the next, all of these things, just because that puts the level of high expectations on your agent that we're not sure. I would love to represent the next Stephen King, of course, but like, in general, my clients, I'm working with them from the startup. So you're not going to be the CEO within a year. And so knowing that you come in there
Right.
with that expectation already, that could be one. The same could be said about like, I've already pictured the film, I already have like
Right.
I have the screenplay written and things like that. And yes, we do work with Hollywood. We worked with book to film agents and, do want to sell your option and do want to sell your film rights. But like knowing you're already kind of like willing to throw that at me, like as in that's it's again, it's that same like that high it's the expectations that aren't going to be met and just going to lead to disappointment on your end, that not necessarily a red flag, but just makes me very wary. And I think a lot of agents very wary because we work with a lot of writers and we want to do the best for you. And then I would say the other one is insulting the genre. So especially something like I see this a lot in like something like
Really?
Twilight, right?
They do
Yeah,
that?
of course. Yeah, because you see something that's hugely successful, but is also and honestly, it's a lot of times, like when it's a women-led book. So something like 50 Shades of Grey, Twilight, romance, things that are like typically like looked down upon. I'll get queries that is like, this is like Twilight, but better than that, and it's kind of like you need to respect the genre you're in. I mean, Stephanie Meyers is hugely successful at what she does, and like for you to disparage that is, especially if you're writing within the genre, I mean, don't disparage it anyway. So I think those would be the two major ones.
Okay, so don't compare yourself to any big name artists or writers. And
Don't
insult.
expect. It's more of don't expect to be them. Does that make sense? Like you can say
Yeah,
like
actually,
my book is like Harry Potter, but with a sci-fi twist or something like that. Just don't go in there saying like I am the next Harry Potter.
Right. And then don't insult the genre.
Yeah.
Okay. Objectively, did you read 50 Shades of Grey?
I read some of it.
I did too.
I did read Twilight.
Well, yeah. So I'll be transparent. I have been a critic of 50 Shades of Grey.
No, that's fine.
I have been a critic because like I tell people like if that book can get as far as it can, like she did something right. Whether we think the book was well written or not, the fact of the matter is she got a publisher, she got an agent, she had 3 movies made of the book. She did something right.
Yeah.
So if she can figure it out with the way that she wrote the book, if you're willing to put in the work as an author, you can probably you might not get 3 movies, but you'll make it as far as you're willing to put in work for it. Am I wrong about that?
No, and I guess I should reword how I stated that. It's not that you can't be, it's not that you can't have like criticism of books you don't like. You don't have to like everything. You don't have to enjoy everything. But if you come in with a, S&M type romance and you tell me I did this better than 50 Shades of Grey, like if you were to come in and it's fine for you and me to chat and be like, well, I didn't really like the writing. That's totally normal. But in your query, what you don't want to do is be like, I can write this better.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So let's take the other side. What has been some of the things that you've seen in your query letters where an author has really impressed you?
It's when they know their genre, honestly. And I know this sounds funny because, and again, as I get more experience, I don't have as high expectations on writers to know the genre well and to know the market. But it really does become clear when you read in your genre that you're writing in. If you know it so well, and this actually links to the mysterious comp titles. People worry about comp titles so much, and the best comp titles are always by people who read so much, like read voraciously. Like if you're a mystery reader and you read current mysteries all the time, and then you happen to write a mystery, it's going to be really easy for you to be like, oh, this is like this book and this book,
Right.
And that shows in your query. So that's not necessarily something you can do just magically. Like it has to be natural. So unfortunately I can't.
If I can interrupt for a second.
Sure.
People who don't know what comp title means, what does that mean?
Oh, so a lot of times it's a way to suggest where your book falls in the market. So it's not what your book is. It doesn't tell. I mean, there's actually 2 different ways you can use comp titles. One is actually to say, this is what my book is. And you see something like Star Wars meets Princess Diaries, and then you're looking at just like kind of a wide range, like, oh, that's intriguing, that's weird. But that's a more of a marketing comp thing. Whereas
Right.
comp titles that you would use in your query that, what I refer to as on the shelf is where, if your book was on the shelf, what would be on either side? So going back to that reader again, what two books does that, girl who reads YA fantasy, what is sitting on her shelf at home? What is she reading? What is she like TikToking about? What is she like, out there tweeting about? What authors is she following? Who's she really excited to read? And those books would be, your comp titles. Sorry,
Your comp titles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, keep your readers in mind, guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just me saying it now. It's not just me. We have a real literary agent who is in the industry doing the thing. She's telling you the same thing I'm telling you. So, okay, I think we were talking about what authors have done in the query letter that impressed you before I so rudely interrupted.
Oh no, and so yeah, so if you nail those comp titles, that's really impressive. But I can't emphasize, don't stress and don't freak out about the comp titles. On the flip side, like 90% of them are messed up, and I don't think most agents, maybe if you're like a little bit newer, a little bit more cynical, you might reject based off comp titles, but most of us know that it's really difficult to figure all this out. So we're not like out there being like, oh, well, they use this comp, it's a stressful. But if you nail them, that is impressive. So work hard to nail them, but don't stress that if you don't nail them, you're going to fail.
Okay. So read in your genre, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Read the books that you want to write.
Exactly. That's the way. And then, and this is also
pretty much how that goes.
Not natural and that you can't necessarily fake, but the bios, when you have a bio, and I'm not necessarily saying the massive writing bio. Of course, that's the obvious, right? Like, I've been published by this magazine and this magazine and the New Yorker. Yeah, duh. But aside from that, like I said, if you're writing legal thrillers and you are a lawyer at a high, powered law firm in the middle of Chicago, like, awesome, and this goes, actually, they talk a lot about now, like, BIPOC voices, like, same, like, not, and we don't want to out anyone's identity if you're not comfortable with it, but if you're writing something from a unique perspective and you have something of yourself that brings authenticity to that voice, that can be super, that can stand out a lot too. And I'm not saying that you need to use your identity as a way to market yourself, but if you brought it into your story, if that was a specific part of your story that you really, that was a theme that you're really passionate about, then, if you talk a little bit about that in your bio, that can be super helpful. And that's not just, BIPOC identity, that's all identities, right? Like, if you're from the Bay Area and you're a California person and you want to write, something about the Bay Area and you just love the Bay Area and you know it in and out because you were maybe, born there, that can be super, interesting for us in your bio. So
something that that makes you stand out, like that shows that you're the writer for this book, like you said before.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that makes sense to me. Okay, so next question, we're kind of moving forward from query letter mistakes now. So let's say you like the query and now you want to get a sample of the book. Is it still the first 3 chapters? Is that what you guys still ask for?
Well, I don't know. This is a great resource. How many of you are aware of? It's called Query Manager, but it's the same person who invented Query Tracker. If you don't know what Query Tracker is, it's querytracker.net. I think. I don't think it's .com. I think it's .net. And Patrick, I believe his name is the owner of both these sites, and he created Query Tracker before, and it was a way for writers to track agents' response times.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really great site. It's really great, and there's comments on how agents are interacting with, like, so if an agent's not necessarily being particularly kind, or maybe doesn't respond, all that kind of pops up on there. And then a few years ago, he actually pivoted. So he's maintaining that site, but he actually pivoted and he created what's called Query Manager. And that is something for agents to use as a submissions portal. And it's really helpful. And actually, I think he likes it because I think it gives him data, like more real-time data than just authors uploading the data. But
Sure.
it's been super helpful for us. And so we can ask for samples, 50 pages, full manuscripts, however we want to set it up, the streamlined process. So I juggle between asking for the first 10 pages. Usually I can tell from about 10 pages of a sample. But the problem is sometimes I'll ask for those 10 pages, I'll read the 10 pages, think, oh, I need to read more, ask for the full, but then get 15 pages into the full and be like, oh, this isn't for me. And yet I sit on the full manuscript because I'm like, oh, I need to give them personal feedback now. And so that thought process happens in my head. And so I'm thinking that maybe it would be better for me to just ask for the full manuscript right up front, since we're all electronic these days. There's no paper waste. That's something
True.
I've just been like thinking about in my head, and probably will be doing. I'm opening the queries in a week or two. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that I've found is when I'm editing a book, the first the first
Mm-hmm.
3 chapters
Mm-hmm.
typically are the best written version of the book,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
typically,
Yep.
because authors tend to go through that multiple times. And so it
Yep.
gets shiny and polished up. And then you read in the middle and you're like, okay, this
And
is
then it
this is
kind of
why I'm
falls.
here.
Yep.
Let's
Yep.
fix it.
I mean, yeah,
But
that's
my
exactly
question,
it.
my question on this is, because I tell authors all the time, if you're going to query, have your manuscript ready,
Mm-hmm.
published ready, edited, it's done. You're done touching it. Because if an agent reaches out and they say they want the full manuscript, what you don't want to say is, "Oh, I'm still writing the book." That's
Yeah.
that's not what they want to hear. Is,
Yeah.
is that right or wrong?
That is right. There's flexibility to that. Like I have had writers be like, oh, I got feedback from somebody and I really want to make these revisions. Can I send it to you? And of course that's always fine. The only the only time it becomes a hiccup, I guess. Now you definitely should be ready and finished. Don't go out there before you finish polish it to the best you thought it could be. That's of course always
Right.
going to change. You're always going to get feedback and want to revise again, and that kind of thing. That's totally
Sure.
fine. The only time it becomes a hiccup when it's not finished is, let's say, because the other thing is like remembering that agents are all human. We have schedules. We have other clients that we're doing. We're negotiating contracts for. We're holding their hand when they're rejected. We're working a lot, and we have a whole schedule, and then we're doing podcast interviews, or we're doing editor interviews, or we're doing we have like our time is so limited, as you can tell,
Right.
as you know from our conversation scheduling this. And so when I sit down to a submission, and I usually when I'm just looking at subs, I can do it in the morning before I get up from bed. I'll go through a couple and be like, okay, these are obviously not for me. But the ones that I'm curious about, the ones that I'm like really interested in, I need to have space. I need to be able to sit for at least half an hour, if not an hour, to get through, and I'm sure you as an editor know this, like there's that there was a really interesting article in the New York Times, or it was a podcast about deep reading and how your brain is on a different level when you're deep reading versus when you're skimming. And skimming is what we do on our tablets, on our phones, all those things. But deep reading is something that you as an editor and myself as an agent, we both know you have to get to that place in order to give genuine feedback on an editorial, right? And that's what I need to do with a submission. I need to get into that deep reading mode in order to understand what, if I have a vision for it, if I'm willing to go the distance for it, because I can't just enjoy the book. Like if I just like it, that's fine, but that doesn't mean I can sell it. That doesn't mean I can take it the distance. That doesn't mean I can go up and down with you as, publishers shut down and your book doesn't get, picked up by XYZ and things. Like I'm not going to be able to take you to that distance without really passionately feeling that. And so I have to get so sorry, long story short, you send that submission, I ask for the full, and I've got the space to read that full, in the next week or so. And then you say, well, it's not ready yet. Give or take 3 months down the line, I might already have another book that fits that space. And, so that's kind of why you want to make sure you're ready, because we're setting up ourselves, make sure we're ready to read your full.
That you said a lot in that, in those last 2 minutes. That was like gold, because like people have to understand, like you said, you guys are human. You have your own schedule. Like they exist, you guys, and they're in the flesh. Okay. She's real. She's really a literary agent. She's got a tight schedule. Like I'll tell you, when we were scheduling this, just so that you guys can understand, we went back and forth on emails. She told me her schedule, but I was ready. Like I was like, okay, cool. I responded as fast as I could. Hey, what day and time works? She told me the day and time. I made sure it was ready. I sent her the links. I asked for a picture. I did all the backhand or the background stuff so that all she had to do was show up and be ready to talk. I made it as easy as I possibly could for her to be here. If I had made it hard and I said, oh, well, I don't know if we can do that. Can we do it next week? Or can we do it? She probably would have said, no, it's not for me. It's not for me. So when you're querying, keep that in mind. Like she has a tight schedule. How can I make this as easy as I can for her so that she's interested and actually willing to sit down and read my stuff?
Yeah, and it's easier for me to sit down for an hour and chat with somebody about publishing than it is for me to sit down for an hour and do editorial too. I mean, it is genuine.
Oh yeah.
As you know,
yeah.
It is genuine. It is difficult. It is work. And so, at this point, for me, this is where we separate a little bit. It's unpaid work.
Right.
I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid editorial. This is me being like, okay, here's my vision for this. Maybe I'll get paid for it someday.
Right. Yeah. If you feel like you can sell it. If you don't, I mean, now you've wasted an hour.
Well,
half an hour.
Yeah, that happens. You have to really love books.
Right. Oh yeah. Like I'm a musician and I write books as well. These are two fields that you have to love it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go in like there's just to kind of ramble a bit. I apologize. But one of the people that I will never ever work with are people who coming in, they send me something, they're brand new, they've never written anything, never sold anything, and the first thing out of their mouth is, I have a bestseller.
Yeah.
Automatically, I know this is not right for me.
Yep.
Because you have no idea.
Yeah.
You're not in the industry. You've never written a book. You've never sold a book. You don't even know what a bestseller is. You're just looking for the money. Those are the easy people to weed out. They're just looking to get paid quick because they saw on some movie someday or some documentary about J.K. Rowling.
There's movies that's the way they show writers' successes. You're like, oh, come on, that's
that's not what happened. That's not how it happened. You're not showing her living in her car for 2 years on this documentary, But those are the people that I never work with because I already know what to expect here. They have high expectations. Most of the time, they're not willing to do the work that it takes to actually become a bestseller because it's a lot of work.
Yes.
It's a lot of work to reach that level of success. It is not I just wrote this book and now I'm going to make it.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I like to tell writers, especially new writers, like, the ones that are hungry, but maybe a little bit more humble than that, but like ready to go. It's a lot of times you have to think about it. Like you're starting a new career, you're not going to start, you're not going to start at the mailroom and then be a CEO within a year. Like right. It's a long process and it's grueling and a lot of it's unpaid. And that's an unfortunate aspect of our society that like the arts, music, books, visual is not well paid. But that's just the reality of it.
And that actually segues into my next question. What are some unrealistic expectations that a lot of writers have about getting an agent? So like, let's say they've locked you up or you're interested in bringing them on as a client. What are some of the unrealistic expectations that you get from writers?
Well, I think one of the bigger ones is that like once you've got your agent, your work is done. That like you're not going to have like, so a lot of times, and this is maybe not necessarily an expectation, just more of a myth. But once you get an agent, your work is actually just beginning. I try to tell, my clients who are yet published, I try to say like, you don't have a deadline. Like make this book the best it can be because you literally don't have a deadline. You can do all of the things, make all of the changes. Like, once you're under contract and you've got 9 months to write a book that's as good as that book that you've been working on for 5 years, like it's a whole different ballgame. And then on the other end, you're going to have reviews coming in. You've got people who don't like your book. You've got, it's.
Oh, That's
Yeah.
a big one. You got to have some thick skin because people
Yeah.
are going to
Yeah.
come for you.
You think being rejected by an agent is hard, but like people
Sure.
on the internet are not kind, and
Yeah, these trolls on the internet, they
yeah.
are brutal,
Yes. I mean,
vicious.
the difference can be, and is that you have a team behind you at that point. You're no longer
Mm,
soloing it. So you've got your agent, hopefully. And I work with a foreign rights agent. I also work with Hollywood film book to film agents. And then hopefully we find you and this is the other thing, is the process of getting an editor and an imprint and a book deal, right? That is also heartbreaking. And like you can go years. I've sold a book within a month of signing it, and then I've sold, it took like 5 years. Like it can be
mm,
a very different process, and each experience is individual. But I would say the expectation is that, we're somehow just able to snap our fingers and get you a book deal. Like it's
mm.
equally as difficult on our end to, make sure that we have the right. That's why we have to have such a strong vision for your book, because
Right.
I got to take it the distance. Like I have to be able to like weather the rejections with you, hold your hand, if you need it, like do multiple rounds of revision before we go out on submission. And then when we go out on submission, be like, what's next? What are you writing? Like, let's figure out what
Right.
we're doing next. So yeah, expectations of agents is that there's two, right? It's like that, we're going to snap our fingers and magically make everything happen. But the other thing too to remember is that on the flip side of that, like I have heard a lot of stories of writers who are too scared to talk to their agents. They're like, I
Mm,
haven't heard from my agent in 6 months. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like they're just, ghosting me, things like that. And unfortunately this does happen because as you've talked about, like our schedules are super tight. We have to
mhm.
prioritize things that need to be responded to right away. Things like that deal, that deal that we're like working through, that contract, make sure that the ink is dry. But, if an agent is really truly not handling your communication well, that's not fair on your end. Your agent
For
is your
sure.
partner. And
For sure.
that's really key to remember that as well. Like just as you want to be treated with respect, they also want to be treated with respect. There's two sides of that. So
Absolutely. Okay. So going in thinking, hey, I got an agent, I'm good. No, sir.
right.
You're not good. Or ma'am.
Yeah.
You're not good.
Yeah.
You still got a lot of work to do. This is I tell them, even when you self-publish, it's
Yeah.
an investment.
Yes.
Like you're probably not going to break even on that first book.
Right.
Like unless you like get some crazy deal with a publisher,
Yeah.
you're not going to break even.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a
Unless
lot of
you're,
authors,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, unless you've written what was that book that came out? Oh, Colleen Hoover. Like unless you're Colleen Hoover. And she didn't, she
I mean,
started out same way, self-publishing, built up her channels, built up her fan base, wrote multiple
right,
books. I mean, that's actually a really good point that you bring up. The first book is not the book that's gonna, I mean, sometimes the 0.2%, maybe, but
right.
the more content you have, the more books you publish, whether or not you're going traditional route or self-publishing, that's, you're building your career.
Yeah. And it's an investment into the future. So you have to think long term.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I don't work with I have a bestseller
Right.
ideas because that's very short term
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's
It
not an
has to be long
investment.
term.
That's okay. We did it. Now where's my money? And
Yeah.
no,
I
you're not.
will push back a little bit on if it's nonfiction. If you are an expert in your field, and you're writing, something about AI that's right now, right? And you work in AI engineering and you write the next AI engineering book, that might be the only book you have in your repertoire, and that's going to be fine. And nonfiction agents work a lot like that, and you work on a one book basis and it's fine. So again, we're talking fiction.
Right.
You want to be a career writer is kind of the discussion we're
Right.
having here.
Nonfiction's a little bit different though because you have to come in with some level of expertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So right off
Yeah.
the top, people
Yeah.
who are buying your book know, okay, this person knows what he's
Exactly.
talking about because blah 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 blah. Like business,
Exactly.
even digital marketing business people,
Yeah.
they have to have some sort of track record before they're trusted by the audience.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, that makes sense.
And that's what's
Okay,
everybody's, that's that unique, that thing called platform, which I know a lot of writers are like,
right.
what about my platform? He described the platform perfect.
Okay, we'll talk about that here in a second because I do want to get into that. I want to talk
Sure.
about like what writers should do, but let's table that for just a second. What are some advantages of having an agent that a lot of people don't know about?
I think on my end, and I could say all the typical things like we help you negotiate contracts, we know the legal language, we network with the publishers, in New York, and in the mid-level publishers, we know all the editors, things like that. That's all the stuff you probably all already know.
Hmm.
I think one of the advantages that I've noticed with my clients, at least in my individual case, is that you have someone to tell you it's gonna happen.
Mm,
So, having come from a writing background myself, like I do, and seeing now lots and lots of writers trying to go through this path, it can be really demoralizing, with every next rejection letter, every, or if you're self-publishing, nobody's buying your book, like all of that stuff, it can feel really lonely.
mm,
And
mhm.
so one of the advantages of having an agent is you have someone who is both confident in the industry they work in. So, I have a lot of confidence in my writers, probably more than they have in themselves, because
Mm,
it's not me personally connected to the writing. I mean, I'm connected to the writing, but it wasn't torn out of my heart and soul. It was, so I'm
right.
more of like a carekeeper, and so I can really kind of support them as things start looking, like we can't get them a deal, blah blah blah. We're still building even if they don't realize it, we're still building their career with each new book they write, partnering with
Mm,
me, and then
right.
usually can sell them on book 2, book 3, book 4. And
Right. Yeah.
sometimes our relationships end at that point. Like the writer's like, I feel like I need to go a new path, and that's fine, But if they hang out with me, it usually is a development of, their career, even if they're not published.
So another partner to help. That actually is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with my
Hard.
self-publishing authors, I
Yeah.
have to do the same thing. They're
Yeah.
like, is this gonna pan out? And I'm like, listen, I see a lot of books.
Yeah.
I see a
Yeah.
lot of books, and I've helped publish a lot of books. I know the ones that get great reviews on Amazon, and I know the ones that don't. I can
Right.
see it right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So having somebody else who believes in you
Right.
besides yourself and your family,
Yes.
that's a big thing.
Almost like
That's
a
a big thing.
coach. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like almost like a coach. Yeah. If you have that, that can really help. So that's what I would say can be really positive about having an agent or, an editor to help you through these kind of things.
Okay, now this is an interesting question that I got from one of the authors in one of the writing groups that I have on Facebook. His question was, why should an indie author have an agent?
Okay.
And that's it's really interesting because it's a good question. Why should instead of going indie, why should you look into having a literary agent in today's digital day and age?
So there's two questions in there. Like one is why should an already established indie author get an agent? And one is if you're a new author starting out, which direction do you think you should go? So
Hmm.
those are two different questions. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna go with the first one first and talk a little bit about that. And I'll bring up Colleen Hoover again because that's an easy example. Also, sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Oh my gosh, but he just wrote Project Hail Mary. Andy Weir. So Andy
Okay.
Weir, wrote The Martian, and that was a self-published book before it became what it became. And there's a couple other examples I could give, but
I'm sorry. Say that again. It was a self-published book before it became what it became.
so he published, I
I
believe,
tell
on a blog post.
I tell you guys this all the time. Just because you self-publish does not mean you can't get an agent. I just wanted you to say it too,
Yeah.
because
So,
sometimes they won't listen to me.
so well, here's the reality of it. Okay, so if you self-publish and then you become successful at self-publishing, right? It's the same factor as traditional publishing here, is that
Mm,
you start getting the numbers, the readers and the money coming in, that you're not going to have to go looking for an agent. They're going to come find you. I haven't yet done that, just because I'm not sure how to navigate that space, but like there are plenty of big agents that will come to you and say like, hey, I've got an idea, like I think with The Martian, and I this might not be accurate, but my understanding is that when they went in, they were able to negotiate that he keeps the ebook rights, which is like unheard of in traditional publishing, right?
I've
So
never heard of that.
print rights went to, and maybe it's Howl, it might be somebody else, but there was a situation where an indie author enjoyed a huge success with a particular book online. Then the agent, got an agent, and the agent took them to traditional publishing, and they kept the ebook rights because they had the power to do that, because they already had so much success.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, I think it might be Howl. It might. We can reconvene later, and I can give you the exact name of it. But so you already have, and then I know like Colleen Hoover. I mean, she's got so much power of negotiation because she's hugely popular. She can write in whatever genre she wants because she started out with YA, was writing romance, now is in thrillers, but her audience is so voracious that like when she did make the switch to traditional publishing, she could basically like write the rules herself, right?
Right. She could set the market pretty much.
Yeah, right. And so in that particular case, an agent's going to come to you and an agent's going to tell you why they're useful. And a lot of it's going to be just helping you manage. Like you have so many properties now, like it's no longer the one book that you could like, check every single, line of the back cover to make sure that it was fine. So it's usually a management kind of thing where the agent can help you manage what's your burgeoning career, make sure you don't get taken advantage of, like legal language, things like that. Make sure you're not giving away rights that you didn't know that you could keep, things like that. So that would be why I would say an indie who is already an indie author potentially would get an agent. However, if you're an indie author and you're successful on your own and you don't feel you need an agent, there's no reason to get one. Like there's so many different paths to success with publishing and writing that, if that's your jam, you've got a great relationship maybe with an editor, that, you're getting your books out, and an agent. But if an agent does approach you, it's worth hearing them out because they might be able to take you to levels of, now to return back to, unless you want to, if you have a comment on that, but I can return back to the other question.
Again, I've told authors, because I know other authors who've done that. They've self-published, and like they get picked up by an agent or a publisher will come and pick up the entire series and republish it under their imprint. Like so developing that readers list, that's the first thing that I tell my authors. Like once we get to about the formatting stage, I'm like, start talking about your book, start getting people's email addresses and their cell phone numbers, start developing a list of readers that once the book goes live, you can reach out to, and they will buy and review your book. Start building that list of people, because that is so important. Whatever way you want to go, if you want to stay indie and establish yourself as an indie, you can. If you want to get a literary agent, now you're not just another letter in the 10. It's, I have this, but I have a list of 100 people from the first book. I got another list of 50 people who are actively buying, reviewing my book. And that gives you kind of a leg up on the rest of everything else that's coming in. So, I mean,
it's
focus on the reader, like you've been saying.
Yeah, but also is like, to return what we were discussing before, is that it's not going to be on the first book probably. I mean, maybe every once in a while it does happen, but more than likely, I mean, even with traditionally published authors, it's usually about the fourth successfully published book that you start to see an income, like a standard income, and even that income isn't necessarily the income you'd see at a regular job, and that fourth successfully published book, it goes on to continue, you kind of like snowball with that success. And that's when the agent's probably going to come and step in, and kind of say, do you need some help managing what, obviously you've already proven yourself, and hopefully they don't come in just looking to make money. Like hopefully they come in because they're interested, they're intrigued by you, they're intrigued by what you're doing in the space you're doing it. They want to kind of help you navigate that space. But There are, I'm not going to lie, there are definitely probably agents coming in because they think they can make money off of you. So that can happen as well.
Just like
But
any other business.
yeah. On the flip side, if you're just starting out and you want to know, well, what's the difference between going the indie route and going the agent route? There's a lot of things, and we were just talking about that. Like, if you're not able to hire, maybe you don't have the money to like pay for editors, pay for cover, pay for all these things that you really should be paying for when you self-publish, to make sure that you have the level of professionalism on your editorial and on your cover design and on your back cover copy and marketing. Then an agent, no agent will charge you. Like, you should not be paying an agent, basically, because, and then that is the costs that you would maybe be paying if you went self-published will be offset by the publisher. The publisher will be covering all those costs.
Right.
So that's kind of the bottom line, but that's sort of a black and white answer, and not really, you can figure out ways to, you can get your friend who designs and maybe, get a discount from the editor, so there's ways to kind of navigate that space as well. But really, an agent is a partner, right? So you're really looking for that partner who wants to take you in your career to the traditional space. And then, I hate to say it, but like, publishers have a massive amount of money. Like, they say they don't, but they do. And they're
it's
the
a
ones.
$2.4 billion industry, I think they made in 2022.
Yeah. Even as much
I wrote
as
it
they
down
pretend.
somewhere. I did the research. I
Yeah.
was like, who says there's no money in writing? Do
No.
you see this number? $2.4 billion? That's unheard of.
Yeah, but then they like spend it on these big books. That's for a different time.
We'll come back. That's another interview.
Yeah. So, so they're going to be able to get your book into spaces that you don't necessarily are going to be able to do on your own. And there's things like book tours, and it's just a different experience. It maybe nudges your odds of success a little bit higher if your book gets published. But that's a big if, right? And so the indie route, that ensures your book is going to be published. Whereas like, you could spend years trying to find an agent. But if you get the agent and then they get you the book deal and your book is published, I can tell you, watching that process versus, and I went through a self-publishing process myself about 10 years ago, and watching the difference. Like, you have a team of marketing and promotion and a team of editorial that goes through, and you have your editor, and then you have someone who goes through it and checks for, copyright, just like copy edits it, like the whole thing, like line editing. It's, and then, and that's the other thing, is the distribution, right? They have the distribution to be in all the bookstores, so they can get your book everywhere it needs to be to get like the physical book in front of people versus just online. So there's advantages and disadvantages.
You said something in that answer, and I want to pick your brain about it. Should an author buy or hire an editor before they query?
That's, I think, individual preference. If you can afford it, there's no, you can, sure. Like, if but you really need to do your research on those editors. Like, you have to make sure they have experience. See that, they should have a website that states clearly like the projects they've worked on, the successes maybe they've had, things like that. But there can be kind of it'd be interesting, because like, if you're querying agents and you work with an editor before, you go to the agent, and then your agent's going to maybe expect your next manuscript to be that same level. So maybe think about retaining that editor if you can afford it, even when you're working with your agent. Now, some agents might disagree with that. They might want to be just the only eyes on the project. That's fine. But, I have worked with a client who had an editor, and the editor did a fantastic job, and subsequent books, the client kept working with that editor before we would go out on submission, before they would even come to me. So you can think of it almost like if a beta reader, right? Like, if you have, because I expect all of my clients to have their books beta read before. I'm not your first beta read. I'm going to be your last beta read. And so what I want is either you have a writing group, or a group of people who, like a beta reading group, which there's like slightly different. We can talk about that later. Or an editor, something like that then, but I would expect you to follow that same, not expect, I would hope that you would follow that same trajectory with your next one.
Because we want consistency. I mean, you're building a brand as well as writing a book. So you want, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you want things to be consistent, not, for quality's sake and for branding's sake. Is that correct? Oh, oh, I think we lost her. It's okay. She'll probably hop back in. We were having a couple of technical difficulties beforehand. So maybe her battery died or something. But hopefully she'll hop back in. We're just about done. Like, we've had some really fantastic information here today. And now you guys know it's not just me. It's not just JK saying to you guys, a real literary agent was on and discussing multiple things that you guys can do. We'll review things while we're waiting for her to get back. Let's see if she pops back in. But some of the things that actually she educated me on, like if you're on the fence about whether or not you should get an agent or go the indie route, like it boils down to, with the indie route, your book is going to get published. With the okay, she popped back in. With the agent route, at least somebody else believes in your book besides yourself and your family. So it's a good thing. Mary, welcome back.
Hi,
What
sorry.
happened?
I don't know.
No problem. Did you get a chance to, by chance, hear what I asked you, or did it just?
I think it. Just repeat, just in case.
So what I said was, you're building a brand as well as writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
So if you write one book and it's at this quality, what you don't want is to go down.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to stay at least at this quality or higher, and build that consistency and trust between you and the reader, which is really where the focus is. It's on the reader. I tell people, when I get books to edit, and I have so many authors who are kind of, it's almost a selfish thing. I hate to say it like that, but like, let's just be real. They're thinking about how they want the book to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, listen, yes, it's your book. Yes, it's your experience, or it's your whatever. But you have to get yourself out of it. Get yourself out of the characters. It's not you.
Yes.
The people that you're delivering this to, what is their experience like? Like, what are their thoughts and feelings on it? Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to. That's where you're going to make the money. If if you want to think about the money, you're not going to buy 3 million copies of your book so that you can have the money. They are, right. So okay, that makes sense. It's got to be
accessible. Yeah.
All right. Last question, unless you have some.
Cool.
What should writers do to build their platform? They have TikTok, IG Live, a website.
If you are a fiction writer, I would say just have the basics. Have a website. That's kind of like your calling card, So basically, it would be like a little bit of a bigger bio than what you would send in your query letter. If you want to list your works in project there. So basically, it's just something that if an agent goes to, pops over, says, who's this person? Maybe it has like a photo or an avatar if you're not comfortable with the photo. And then if you are using social media professionally, and I say this is key, professionally, have those social media buttons attached to that website so they can kind of navigate through your professional social media feeds and see what you're doing. And that can be super helpful. But other than that, don't stress about platform, because unless you naturally have a large platform for fiction, it's just going to stress you out and distract you from what you should be doing, and that's writing. Nonfiction, totally different animal.
Right. Okay. Now you said using social media professionally.
Okay.
Explain that. What do you mean by this?
It means that the time you are investing into the social media, there's no censorship here. Like, I'm not going to censor you from saying whatever you want to say, but you need to make sure that whatever your time you're investing into social media is going into it because you want it to reach potential readers. So if you're just on social media, like scrolling through Instagram or whatever for your own pleasure, that's fine. But like, don't try to meld the two because it can be complicated. Like you can kind of go down rabbit. Like if you're looking to invest in your platform, make sure you do it with awareness and like, okay, I want to build up, I'm going to have X amount of posts for, I'm going to interact with X amount of people. I'm going to do, X amount of things. And that's all professional based, however you choose to do it. It doesn't have to be censored. It doesn't have to be like, it can still be political. It can still be all the things that you want it to be. Just doing it with the awareness that this is your time. This is your professional time.
So social media with a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's big, actually, because that's a thing that a lot of writers don't even think of, especially the new ones. They think I'll get a website when I have more books under my belt. And I'm like, you got to start somewhere. You got to start building that list somewhere. And you can't start, like if you're going to start building a reader's list when you're 3 books in, you're going to be $7,000, $8,000, $15,000 in the hole between, the cover, the editing. That's really like editing and marketing are the most expensive pieces on the self-publishing side.
It's pretty expensive on the traditional I mean, we don't you don't pay for it, but like, it's expensive on
somebody does.
Yeah, somebody does. And they let you know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So how can authors find you? What's your social media? Where can they go to query you?
Okay, yeah. So you can go to kimberleycameron.com. So it would just be, or you can go to marycmoore.com. And I mean, if you just Google Kimberley Cameron Literary Agent, it's going to pop up. We're about to launch our new website pretty soon. So once that launches, it'll be within the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks. I will be open to queries, and you can find all that information on the websites. So, yeah.
Okay, awesome. What about social media? Are you open to having people follow you, or are you?
Oh yeah, I'm not.
Really.
I don't use it as frequently as I used to, but I do professionally use Twitter and Instagram, so you can find me if you would like to. I'm usually just tweeting about my clients, or even just retweeting them. So it's not necessarily an interesting feed to follow, but I will tweet updates if I like open to submissions or something like that, or if I'm at a conference. But if you want to follow my clients, that's fantastic. If anybody's writing YA fantasy or writing dark fantasy or writing mysteries or writing, well, even I guess I'm representing middle grade, young adult. I'm representing a lot of it nowadays, but yeah.
That was gonna be my next question. Which genres are your favorite ones to read or represent? Oh, did she freeze again? Okay. I put her websites here in the comments. Oops. So marycmoore.com, kimberleycameron.com. That's how I found her. It was Kimberley Cameron and Associates. They're a literary agency. And wow, this has been a lot of great information. Hopefully you guys take this information as well. If anybody in the comment section or anybody watching right now has any questions that they want to present, we got maybe 15 minutes or so left. Please type them in the comments. I'll wait a little bit for Mary to come back. But this has been great. Like a lot of great information for authors. If you want to lock up a literary agent, these are some great steps to take in order to be able to do that. So there she is.
Sorry, I think I think my computer's telling me I need to get off because I have a meeting soon.
Yeah, we're about to close up shop anyway. All I did was I asked if anybody in the chat is watching and would like to present a question, to go ahead. But if we don't get any in the next 30 seconds or so, like we'll probably close up shop. Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you
For
nice.
answering my emails. Yeah, it's fun. You're fun. You are. I'm telling you, like this lady's fun. If you can lock her up as an agent, you're probably gonna have a good time. Like she won't pull the wool over your eyes or anything. She's a lot of fun.
I do want to encourage everyone watching this to just keep going. Like, if you basically, I think if anything is taught from this takeaway from this is whether or not you self-publish or traditionally publish, is find your people. Find
Mm.
find your writing partners, find your beta readers, find your editors, your agents. And that's actually, to go back to the social media idea, like quote unquote using it professionally. The more you interact with writers, and writing groups, you might find Facebook groups or things like that. I think you mentioned the Facebook group a couple times. Those are going to be your people, and those are going to get you through the tough times. So yeah. And then in terms of agents, you just gotta keep trying. We're all overworked and slammed, but we're doing our best.
And there is money in this industry, you guys. There's a lot of money in this industry, but you have to do the work. It's not going to come overnight for most of you.
Yes.
So what are your favorite genres to read or represent? Like, what are you actually representing?
Oh my gosh. I represent all fiction. I've become just kind of omnivorous at this point. I specialized in sci-fi fantasy because that was what I grew up on. I read a shit ton of it, particularly like female written. But I do really enjoy good mystery, good thriller. And I've been breaking into nonfiction recently. Had some really interesting reads there. So I'm all over the place, but what I'm really hungry for right now is what they call book club fiction, with like a little bit of a speculative bent. A book I'm really super excited about coming out is called The Deep Sky by Yume Kitase, and it is, it's a grounded science fiction that's coming out with a publisher that does, like Reese Witherspoon book club picks and things like that. So if you all get a chance to check it out, it's really good. It's coming out in July. And then another book that's coming out in May is called St. Juniper's Folly. It's a young adult, near speculative, about a haunted house and a couple of queer teenagers who are trying to figure out, it's kind of like a trio of friends, but a queer love story with a queer love story. And there's like witches, and it's really fun. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for right now. And then I'm also really, really hungry for some whimsical middle grade. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, speaking of, whimsical middle grade, another book coming out. I'm sorry, I'm just plugging all my authors, but
please do.
So
please
it's called Keenan Masters and the Peerless Academy Crew. And it's by Devon Sanders. He's the executive editor at Faya Magazine. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically kind of a near future scientific-y fantasy middle grade.
A lot.
Like it's like Harry Potter-esque, but and he's a Black author, so like all of the kids are Black, and it's super fun and cute and all of the things. So I really like it. So yeah, those are my three big books coming out this year that I'm really excited about. So hopefully y'all check it out.
Actually, sci-fi and fantasy is my genre. That's the genre that I write.
There you go. Well,
maybe I'll query you.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Final thought. I tell my authors this, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. This industry is not for the introverted.
I think
meaning people, not people who are naturally introverts, meaning people who don't want to talk to anybody.
I think you can get away with it more if you're traditionally published. It's not, you if you have the book deal from the big publisher, if you write that book that's like someone like Where the Crawdads Sing, I think she's fairly introverted, and that book did really well. But she's got a huge team behind her, that are doing kind of all the work. So I would say definitely not self-published. You have to put yourself out there. You don't even have an option. Indie published as well. And when I say indie published, I mean by a smaller press. So smaller press is usually, they'll cover the expenses of editorial and cover, but like marketing and PR is just usually going to be all on your own. So, and then, if you can, the bigger publishers love to see it too. If you're not, so it's helpful if you can put yourself out there, for sure.
There you go. Mary Seymour, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Great information.
Great. So fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right.
A lot of fun.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
Jonathan.
this is The Right Way. I am Jonathan Miller. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next